It's no secret that today's job market is pretty tough. I've been seeing lots of videos out there on social media of people putting out 200, 300, 400 applications and really not getting any serious traction on obtaining that job that they want. So I want to provide you today with 3 tips on how to move your career search forward. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. So it's no secret that 2026 job market, there's really no other way to say it. It really kind of sucks. There's still a number of businesses that are struggling. Inflation is high. We've got new, military conflicts around the globe now. And really from a business standpoint, there's so much uncertainty that all the layoffs that happen in 2025 are probably going to continue in some way, shape, or form into 2026. And so what you have is this, huge amount of people that have experience in the workforce that are now looking for jobs. Now you add the 2025 graduates from last year that are still looking for a job, and now you're going to have a whole new batch of 2026 graduates coming in. And really what happens is your application, if you're job searching right now, can get lost in a sea of other applicants really with like credentials or not really standing out in any other way than you are in that particular applicant pool. So I want to give you 3 pieces of advice that could maybe help you elevate your name in the applicant pool, but also prevent your resume from getting stagnant moving forward. And so let's start first with what I call the Indeed trap. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Indeed for a lot of reasons. You get a lot of good salary information, you get a lot of good company information, kind of that reverse reference check, if you will. What are people in that company saying about it? How many stars does it get? That sort of thing. So there are a number of great things about Indeed. The downside about Indeed is that it's super saturated with all different types of positions and some features that aren't really applicant friendly. And what I mean by that really is the easy apply feature. I've been watching TikTok and some of these other videos where people are just so upset, and when you drill down to it, a lot of times they're using these easy apply buttons. And when you think about it, you put your information in, you click easy apply, and poof, you're in this pool of applicants, and you certainly are. The thing you need to realize, though, having been a recruiting manager and managed that process, when you get information from Indeed as a recruiter, you have to log into that account and basically go through the applicants that are in that particular bucket. Just because you hit easy apply doesn't mean it's going to put it into the company's applicant tracking system that they use on a day in and day out basis. So essentially what you have to do if you're a recruiter, you got to look at the applications that have come through directly through to the company through the website. But then you also have to remember to log into Indeed. And oftentimes you'll have multiple platforms. So you also have LinkedIn account that you have to look into as a recruiter. And so really, don't fall for the Indeed trap of easy apply and assuming that just because you've clicked that easy apply button and thrown out 100 resumes, a fraction of those, the reality is a fraction of those will probably actually get looked at because of the volume of people using that feature. Instead, make yourself stick out by going to Indeed. It's a great platform to see what types of jobs are out there. Find leads using Indeed, find the company information, then go to the company site, click on careers, make sure it's still an active posting because oftentimes, a position might actually be filled, but it might have another 30 or 60 days or whatever the agreement was to post it on Indeed. It might be a dead job posting, but Indeed still shows it as a live one. So find it first in Indeed. Instead of applying there, go to the company website. Make sure that it's still an active, job posting on the company website, and then apply directly to the company website itself. And what will happen is that will essentially, for most recruiters, go right into their first bucket that they're going to look of applicants, which is directly at the company site through their applicant tracking system. So my second bit of advice I call the 100-mile radius rule. When you look at where a lot of your volume applications go to, oftentimes they're going to be in your metro areas. I live in Colorado, so a lot of times if you post something in Denver, you'll get thousands and thousands of applications. The thing is, that puts everyone kind of in a smaller geographic area. And especially if you're young, I get that you want kind of the nightlife and you might want the noise or those types of things, but if you're right out of college or newer in your career or have the ability to move a little bit, maybe you don't have a mortgage yet, you're just renting, open up that job search about 100 miles. And it might seem like a long way. At the same time, you'd be surprised at the difficulty rural areas have finding qualified applicants. Even if you're willing to move out to a smaller town for 2 or 3 years, no one's saying that's going to be your permanent home forever. That's not your forever job, your forever, rental that you're going to get into, or rental house, or whatever it might be. But, it's a great way to build a couple years of experience, because when you think about it, how many people these days pick one career and then stay in it for 10, 20, 30 years? I mean, really, you're lucky if you get 3 to 5 years out of someone. In a rural area where you struggle to get people, you might have positions open for a year. And I know this from experience. I worked at a trauma hospital in a rural area. And when I say rural, I mean pretty rural. We had about 100,000 people in a 17,000 square mile radius. That was basically, our service area. And so attracting talent, you'd be more than happy in a lot of rural areas to pay fairly well. And be competitive in the industry. It's not going to be high end like living in a metro area, so the salary might be a little bit less, but you'll take 3 good years out of anyone if you can get it. Even if you might, when you hire them, know that okay, they're young in their career, they're probably going to want to move back to the metro, which is perfectly fine, but we'll take the assistance for the 2 or 3 years. Because rural areas struggle so mightily to get a good applicant pool and hit those especially higher level credentials. So go with the 100-mile radius rule. Start looking around and seeing what towns are out there, what businesses that are of decent size. You're probably not going to find major employers out in these areas, but you'll still find some couple $100 million employers out in these rural areas. You'd be surprised at all the different businesses that are in these locations that are actually financially stable, that have a good client base, because when you're in a rural area and there's limited competition, and then also the pay, though a little bit lower because you're living in a rural area, oftentimes is still rather competitive. And so think of it less as, kind of the end game for your career. Think of it more as this is the kickstart or the springboard that could maybe push you back into a higher paying job, maybe in a more metro area. But expand your search to about a 100-mile radius from where you currently are, if you can, of course. Now, if you have a house, a mortgage, kids, they're in school and all that, obviously it's a little bit different. But particularly if you're a newer grad or you're not tied down, open up that radius a little bit. Take out the map and see what other opportunities are around you in that about 100-mile radius. You'd be amazed at the opportunities and what it'll do, especially in this weird kind of job market we're in. Entry-level positions now, especially in metro areas, they want 3 to 5 years. It seems kind of backwards. If it's entry level, you should have, a degree and no experience, but that's just where the job market's going because there are so many people in the job market. The thing is, though, in rural areas, they're not going to be seeing that same high volume of applications. So expand it again, the 100-mile radius rule, see what else is out there for you. And my last bit of advice for you, don't be afraid to, start maybe a side hustle, become self-employed in some way, shape, or form. And this does a couple of things. Even if it's something as simple as a landscaping business in the summer, mowing lawns, washing windows, whatever it might be. And I know some people are thinking, well, I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree, I don't want to mow lawns. There's a couple messages that this sends. Okay, the first one is that you're willing to work. You're not above putting in a little bit of sweat equity. And if you don't want to do blue collar work, hey, that's perfectly fine. Go to your local community college. If you have a bachelor's degree, at a minimum, and oftentimes maybe even a master's degree, there are usually several adjunct opportunities, oftentimes that don't require true teacher certification, but you could actually make $30, $35 an hour being, like an academic tutor. You could maybe be an adult basic education instructor. And really all they require is that you have some kind of a degree, so you can then, have that higher level of education to help someone maybe going through a GED program, or maybe helping with community education courses. If you're good with tech, you're good making videos. I actually taught myself how to make videos. I know all kinds of different software now just by playing with them. Well, if you're good at software, if you're good at those types of things, maybe you do a side hustle of building online content or doing a gig project here, a gig project there. But take on some kind of self-initiative or maybe even part-time work to show that you're continually being active as a worker in the workforce. And I know some people might argue with this, saying, I want to be a manager, I want to be an accountant, or whatever it might be. And I totally understand that. But think about if you're a new college graduate, or maybe you have a mortgage, your bills don't stop simply because you're looking for work, right? So there are some benefits to having your own business. There are benefits to having that extra income come in, because if you're especially unemployed at this point, yes, it's only a side hustle. Yes, it might be just kind of a hobby that you're trying to make a little bit of money off of. At the same time, if you're not bringing in a full-time income like you need to, you're going to have a further and further hole if you're doing nothing. So one, it keeps you a little bit out of the hole. The other thing it does, though, if you have an employer, and let's just put two people, two folks, you both have bachelor's degrees. You've both been on the job hunt for about a year or so. But you have been, for that last year, also finding odd jobs. Maybe you're helping with volunteer things. Maybe you're helping, like I said, build video content. Maybe you started your own business in landscaping or whatever it might be. You're showing that employer that you're not above working, compared to someone who really is just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting and not willing to get their knuckles a little bit dirty. And so it does a couple of things for you. One, it kind of elevates you from that standpoint, because let's face it, there's a lot of people that have all of the same qualifications that you have on paper from a degree standpoint, maybe even some experience standpoint, in a lot of these kind of behind the desk jobs that are starting to go away. The other thing it does, though, is it allows you a secondary income stream. So when you do get that full-time job, you can still make up some of that difference and, quite honestly, be a little bit further ahead in the long term financially and help you out that way. And at the end of the day, also, it never hurts to learn really how to run a business. At one point, I still remember when I was younger, my wife and I were moving around a little bit. I actually ended up with 2 mortgages, and to pay those 2 mortgages, I ended up having a full-time job plus 3 additional jobs. A company that I started, and I was teaching at 2 colleges, part-time in the evenings. And do I think I would want to do that day in, day out for 5 years? Well, no. At the same time, what it did is it allowed me to make up that financial gap. And then once I finally sold my second house, the cool thing was I had a couple of extra side incomes that I kept for another year or so I could build back up my savings and then pay down my college debt. And there's just so many benefits to it. It takes away the elimination of that huge gap on your employment history on your resume. So there's just a number of things where taking on a part-time job, or taking on a gig job, or starting a small business on the side really can separate you or differentiate you, and also have some long-term benefits for you as well. Again, thanks for joining me here on the channel. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.